It was a crisp, overcast morning in October of 1987 when Maplewood Elementary School opened its doors as usual. The small town of Maplewood, Ohio, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing much ever happened. Teachers greeted their students at the doors, and children laughed and ran across the playground, unaware of the day that would forever change their town. But amid the chatter and morning routines, 5 children were already missing, gone without a trace. Their empty desks sat silently in the classrooms, an eerie void that immediately caught the attention of their teachers. Initially, the absence was thought to be a simple mistake. Perhaps the children were late, or maybe they had wandered off to a nearby friend's house. But as minutes ticked by, panic began to rise. The teachers checked every hallway, every classroom, and even the school cafeteria, but the children were nowhere to be found. The principal called the police, his voice trembling as he explained the inexplicable situation. Soon, the entire school was on lockdown, with students whispering in confusion and fear. Rumors began to spread like wildfire. Some claimed the children had been kidnapped, while others feared something far more sinister. Parents arrived at the school, their faces pale with worry. Mothers clutched each other's hands, fathers paced anxiously, and the police set up roadblocks around the small town. Neighbors and volunteers joined the search, combing the surrounding woods, alleys, and fields, calling out the children's names. Dogs were brought in to track scents, helicopters circled above, and every tip was followed meticulously. Yet the more they searched, the more elusive the children seemed. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them. By mid-morning, the reality began to sink in. The 5 children, each from different families, had vanished without leaving a single clue. Their lunchboxes, jackets, and shoes were all left behind, undisturbed, suggesting that whatever had taken them was swift and deliberate. Local reporters arrived to cover the shocking story, turning the small town into a media frenzy. Headlines screamed about the mysterious disappearance, and fear began to grip the community. Parents kept their younger children close, school attendance dropped, and a once peaceful town now felt shadowed by uncertainty. As hours turned into days, the police launched an extensive investigation, questioning teachers, students, and even passing strangers. Every theory imaginable was considered: an accidental wandering, a runaway, a kidnapping, or perhaps something darker lurking in the town's shadows. But despite exhaustive searches and interviews, no solid lead emerged. The children's faces stared back from missing person posters plastered on every street corner, yet no one could explain their disappearance. The event became a chilling mystery that would haunt Maplewood for decades, setting the stage for a revelation that no one saw coming. As the years passed, the Maplewood disappearance became one of those haunting stories that townspeople whispered about in hushed tones. By the early 1990s, the case had officially gone cold. Despite hundreds of leads, search parties, and nationwide media coverage, the 5 children remained missing. Police files collected dust in the local precinct, and for the families, every birthday and holiday without the children deepened the void in their hearts. Maplewood itself seemed frozen in time, its streets carrying the shadow of a tragedy that refused to fade. Residents still recalled the day the children vanished, and that memory haunted them like a ghost. The case drew attention from investigators far beyond Ohio, but every theory ultimately fell apart. Some believed a local predator had lured the children, while others suspected that they had been taken by an organized ring operating across state lines. Conspiracy theories circulated, claiming everything from secret cults to supernatural interference. None of the leads panned out, and as decades went by, the hope of finding the children alive dwindled. Families moved on outwardly, but the invisible grief remained, a silent reminder that something terrible had occurred in their midst. Journalists occasionally returned to Maplewood, attempting to reignite public interest in the case. Each anniversary of the disappearance brought articles and brief television segments, showing the children's faces frozen in time on missing person posters. The town's children who grew up with the story often felt a chill when passing the elementary school, imagining the horror that had taken place. Teachers who had worked at the school during the 1987 incident recounted their experiences with somber precision: the panic, the frantic searches, and the lasting fear that the children might have been nearby yet unreachable. Meanwhile, the investigators who had initially worked the case aged into retirement, passing their files to younger officers who approached the case with fresh eyes but little new information. Technology in the 1980s was limited, and although DNA testing and modern forensic methods eventually became available, no preserved evidence existed to yield definitive results. The police were left with a frustrating combination of memory, speculation, and rumors. For the town, Maplewood Elementary became a symbol of unresolved terror, a school with an unspoken story, its walls holding secrets no one had dared to confront. Despite the passage of time, Maplewood never truly forgot the children. Parents became fiercely protective of their remaining kids, and strangers were watched with suspicion. Any small disappearance in the town sparked immediate alarm, and residents instinctively remembered the haunting lesson from 1987. Tragedy could strike anywhere, even in the safest, most familiar places. The cold case left an indelible mark, shaping the town's identity and its collective memory, creating a tension that lingered, waiting for the moment when the truth would finally surface. It was a brisk morning in early 2022 when Maplewood Elementary finally underwent the long-overdue renovations. Workers were tearing up old floors and inspecting the school's basement, which had been largely ignored for decades. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the air smelled of mildew and rust. As a crew member swept debris from a corner near the boiler room, his broom struck something hard beneath the dust-covered floorboards. At first, he assumed it was a forgotten storage crate, but the metallic outline and rectangular shape suggested otherwise. Curiosity turned into concern when he realized it resembled a trapdoor, long concealed under layers of grime and decay. Authorities were quickly called, and soon a team of detectives and forensic experts arrived to investigate the unusual find. They pried open the rusted hinges of the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Flashlights cut through the murky air, illuminating the walls lined with cracked bricks and cobwebs. The chamber smelled of damp earth and something else, a faint, metallic scent that made even the most seasoned officers uneasy. The narrow room seemed impossibly small, and yet it had been perfectly hidden beneath the school's basement for more than 3 decades. The weight of the unknown hung heavily over everyone in the room. As investigators stepped cautiously inside, their eyes widened at the first shocking discovery: the children's belongings. Backpacks, shoes, jackets, and even scattered toys, all remarkably preserved, as though someone had carefully left them in place. The items were layered with dust, yet unmistakably recognizable to the families who had long mourned their loss. Police carefully documented every detail, photographing the scene and bagging evidence for further forensic testing. The chilling realization settled in that the disappearance of the 5 children had not been random. Someone had intentionally hidden their possessions in a concealed chamber beneath the very school they had once attended. Further examination revealed strange anomalies in the chamber. Symbols were scratched into the walls, some faint, some etched deeply. Torn pages of books and school papers littered the floor, seemingly arranged with purpose. It was clear that someone had spent significant time in this space, perhaps days or even weeks, long ago. The letters found partially burnt in a corner hinted at something far more sinister than anyone had imagined: discussions of rituals, secrecy, and protection. The investigators felt a cold shiver as they realized that the items and markings had survived untouched for decades, as if the person responsible had deliberately left them to be found one day. News of the discovery spread rapidly through Maplewood and beyond, reigniting national attention on the cold case. Families of the missing children, some now elderly, were summoned to view the recovered items. The emotional weight was almost unbearable. Decades of unanswered questions and grief suddenly collided with the terrifying reality of what had been hidden under their school all those years. The hidden chamber offered clues but no answers about what had truly happened to the children. One fact was undeniable: the investigation that had gone cold in 1987 was about to take a dark and unexpected turn, revealing secrets that would shake the town to its core. Once the chamber beneath Maplewood Elementary had been fully secured, forensic teams began the painstaking process of cataloging the evidence. Dusty backpacks and torn lunchboxes were carefully bagged, each item tagged with meticulous precision. Among the personal belongings, investigators found small toys and notebooks, their pages yellowed with age but filled with handwriting recognizable to the families. Even after more than 3 decades, these items retained a chilling sense of the children's presence, a silent echo of lives abruptly stolen. The scene was eerily preserved, almost as if the chamber had been frozen in time, leaving a haunting impression that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. But it was the walls that drew the deepest unease. Etched into the bricks were strange, ritualistic symbols, circles, intersecting lines, and cryptic figures that seemed to follow a pattern only partially decipherable. Some markings were crude, others meticulous, and all of them suggested an intentional purpose. Torn fragments of old newspapers and school papers littered the floor, partially burned or smeared with dark stains. Among them were letters, written in a shaky hand, detailing disturbing plans about sacrifices and protection. Words that made the investigators pause. Whoever had hidden the children and their belongings had left a record of their intent, but in a way that had gone unnoticed for decades. Further examination revealed that the chamber was more than a simple hiding place. Beneath layers of dust, tiny footprints and scuff marks indicated that someone, perhaps the children themselves at some point, had moved within the confined space. Forensic experts speculated that the room had likely been used repeatedly, not just as a temporary storage area. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to tell a story of confinement and fear. They were subtle signs that the chamber had been carefully maintained, and yet it was abandoned abruptly, leaving behind clues that only now, in 2022, could finally be analyzed with modern technology. DNA samples were taken from clothing, toys, and surfaces, though the hope of finding viable traces was slim after so many years. Still, experts were determined to leave no stone unturned. The letters and papers were scanned for handwriting analysis, providing insights into the mysterious author, a person meticulous in planning yet careless enough to leave detailed evidence behind. Investigators began piecing together a timeline of events from these fragments, building the unsettling theory that the children had been deliberately targeted, monitored, and confined by someone with knowledge of the school's hidden spaces. The chamber was not just a physical space but a sinister record of premeditated actions. As news of the evidence spread, Maplewood residents grappled with the unimaginable reality. The children's disappearance had never been an accident, nor a random act. The objects, symbols, and letters pointed to a calculated series of events, orchestrated by someone who had intimate knowledge of the school and its routines. Each new discovery added layers of horror, leaving investigators and townspeople alike questioning how such evil could exist in a place as familiar and seemingly safe as Maplewood Elementary. The evidence unearthed in that hidden chamber was a chilling reminder that the answers to decades-old mysteries often hide in plain sight, waiting for the moment when someone finally dares to look. The discovery of the hidden chamber in 2022 instantly reignited the Maplewood Elementary case, prompting authorities to reopen every lead, no matter how cold or forgotten. Detectives dusted off decades-old files, flipping through yellowed pages filled with witness statements, search logs, and police notes that had been filed away and largely ignored. Suddenly, details that once seemed trivial, a teacher's odd behavior, a janitor's unexplained absences, a tip that had been dismissed as a prank, took on new significance. Every tiny clue was now scrutinized through the lens of modern forensic science, revealing patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. Investigators began interviewing former staff and townspeople who had lived through the original disappearance. Memories long buried came rushing back. Neighbors recalled seeing a van parked near the school during odd hours. Former students spoke of whispered warnings about the basement, and one retired teacher remembered hearing faint, eerie noises coming from the lower floors late at night. Each recollection added a piece to the puzzle, but also deepened the sense of dread. The town's collective memory, once hazy with time, suddenly sharpened, revealing the outlines of something sinister that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Forensic teams analyzed the chamber and its contents alongside modern technology, including 3D scanning and DNA profiling. Old handwriting samples from the letters and symbols were compared with profiles of past suspects and local records. Even long-dead tips that had been filed away were revisited. Sometimes, the smallest detail, a date, a name, or a strange phrase, became the key to unlocking new leads. Detectives worked tirelessly, connecting the dots between the evidence in the chamber and people who had interacted with the school in the late 1980s. Every revelation suggested that the children's disappearance had been deliberate, planned, and orchestrated with chilling precision. As the investigation gained momentum, law enforcement began to uncover overlooked connections between the missing children. Each child, though from different families, had patterns in their schedules, friendships, and daily routines that suggested they had been observed carefully before vanishing. A former janitor came forward with the haunting confession that he had heard conversations and seen strange symbols in the basement years earlier, but had been too afraid to report them. The realization that the school had long concealed a dangerous secret shook the town to its core. Maplewood was forced to confront the terrifying possibility that someone in their midst had orchestrated these events with no perfect planning. With each interview a new piece of evidence, the case transformed from a cold mystery into an active hunt for answers. Detectives compiled detailed timelines, cross-referenced old sightings, and even used modern technology to revisit areas around Maplewood Elementary that had been ignored decades earlier. The reopening of the investigation brought a sense of urgency, Every new clue pointed to a larger, more complex web of secrets, and the possibility of uncovering more victims loomed ominously. The town, once resigned to the tragedy of the past, now faced a renewed wave of fear and anticipation, knowing that the truth about what really happened to the 5 children might be darker than anyone had ever imagined. After months of painstaking investigation, detectives began to notice patterns linking the hidden chamber and the children's disappearance to a much darker presence in the Midwest during the 1980s. The strange symbols, ritualistic markings, and letters found in the chamber were compared against historical records of obscure cult activity across Ohio and neighboring states. Slowly, a chilling realization emerged. The disappearance of the 5 children was not an isolated act, but likely part of a broader, organized scheme carried out by a secretive group whose members had skillfully evaded law enforcement for decades. The breakthrough sent shockwaves through the investigation team. What had seemed like a cold, unsolvable case was suddenly part of a much larger puzzle. Investigators traced the symbols and coded language in the letters to a small, fringe cult known to operate in rural areas during the 1980s. This cult, known for extreme secrecy, believed in rituals involving purity and the control of innocent lives for mystical purposes. Survivors and former members provided fragmented testimonies, recounting ceremonies, hidden rooms, and the chilling obsession with children as vessels. Law enforcement realized that Maplewood Elementary had been targeted deliberately, likely because of its isolation, predictable schedules, and the accessibility of its students. Each discovery confirmed what investigators had long feared. The 5 children had been deliberately chosen and held captive for sinister reasons. With this lead, detectives began cross-referencing other missing child cases from the same era. Names, dates, and locations revealed potential connections that had been overlooked in the 1980s. Authorities identified several surviving members of the cult, now living quietly in small towns or remote areas. Background checks revealed disturbing patterns, criminal records, unusual residences with hidden spaces, and ties to occult groups. Interviews with these individuals produced conflicting accounts, but fragments of the truth began to surface. One former cult member admitted knowledge of children kept for guidance, though they claimed ignorance of what ultimately happened. Each revelation deepened the sense of horror surrounding the original disappearance. Forensic analysis continued in tandem with these interviews. DNA testing, handwriting comparisons, and artifact analysis from the chamber confirmed that the children had interacted with individuals linked to the cult. Items that had once seemed innocuous, toys, journals, scraps of fabric, were revealed to contain traces of ritualistic handling and precise arrangement. Investigators began reconstructing the timeline, piecing together not only when the children were taken but how the cult operated within the school without arousing suspicion. It became apparent that Maplewood had been infiltrated by this secretive group, and the disappearance of the children was part of a calculated, terrifyingly meticulous plan. As the investigation progressed, authorities realized the cult's influence may have extended beyond Maplewood. Records suggested similar disappearances across the Midwest, each marked by strange patterns reminiscent of what had been found in the hidden chamber. The breakthrough revealed that the 5 children's case, once thought to be a tragic anomaly, might be part of a disturbing network of abductions, cover-ups, and ritualistic practices. Every new piece of evidence illuminated a layer of the cult's reach, leaving investigators and the town grappling with the unnerving truth. The darkness that had haunted Maplewood for decades was far from contained, and the full extent of the horror had yet to be revealed. The more investigators delved into the chamber and its contents, the darker the story became. Forensic experts carefully examined the children's clothing, shoes, and personal items, noting the meticulous arrangement of everything inside the room. Each item seemed placed deliberately, almost ritualistically, suggesting that whoever had hidden them had a methodical, almost obsessive attention to detail. Investigators discovered faint biological traces on some of the items, DNA samples that indicated the children had survived in the chamber for a period after being taken. The chilling implications sent waves of horror through the team. The children had been alive, trapped in that hidden room, possibly enduring unimaginable fear. Further investigation into the letters and symbols revealed additional, horrifying details. The cult responsible had not only hidden the children but documented their confinement in painstaking detail. Handwritten notes described steps taken to control the children, references to watchful guardians, and instructions on maintaining secrecy. Forensic handwriting analysts confirmed that these notes were consistent with the same author as the etched symbols on the walls. Every piece of evidence painted a grim picture. The children had been deliberately observed, manipulated, and terrorized before ultimately disappearing entirely. The careful planning behind their abduction was far more calculated than anyone had imagined. Investigators also discovered evidence that suggested the cult had continued monitoring Maplewood Elementary long after the initial disappearances. Subtle disturbances in the chamber, tiny scratch marks, dust patterns, and faint impressions on the walls, indicated that someone had revisited the hidden room over the years. Perhaps the children had been briefly moved or observed, or the chamber had been maintained as a shrine of sorts, preserving the crime for decades. The realization that the perpetrators had a prolonged interest in the victims added another layer of dread, making it clear that Maplewood had been under the silent surveillance of a malevolent presence for decades without anyone realizing it. Interviews with former cult members revealed fragments of information that made the story even more terrifying. One survivor admitted that the children had been part of rituals intended to ensure purity and protection, though they refused to disclose exactly what had happened to them. Another claimed the cult believed the children held special energy and were essential for their secretive ceremonies. The combination of these testimonies, along with the physical evidence in the chamber, created a terrifying picture. The children had been carefully chosen, systematically controlled, and likely killed as part of an elaborate plan. Maplewood's darkest fears were finally being confirmed through tangible proof. Finally, the shocking revelation reached its most haunting point when investigators realized the chamber had been left untouched intentionally. The deliberate preservation of the children's belongings and the ritualistic arrangement suggested that the perpetrators wanted the crime to be discovered eventually, a final, sinister message left behind. It was as if the cult had been taunting authorities in the town for decades, knowing that one day the truth would resurface. The evidence not only explained what had happened to the 5 children, but also hinted at the possibility of more victims, more secrets, and a network of hidden horrors that had been meticulously concealed for generations. The shocking magnitude of the revelation left everyone involved in the case shaken, confronting the darkest aspects of human obsession and cruelty. The discovery beneath Maplewood Elementary finally brought answers, but it also reopened wounds that had never fully healed. For decades, the town had whispered about what really happened to the 5 children, haunted by the unanswered question, where had they gone? Now, the truth emerged, dark and undeniable, revealing a calculated horror that had remained hidden in plain sight. Families could at last grieve with some understanding, but the relief was tempered by fear that the darkness behind those decades-old secrets might reach further than anyone imagined. Maplewood would never forget the children, nor the hidden chamber that held the evidence of a nightmare long buried. And as the town slowly came to terms with the revelation, one chilling thought lingered in every mind. Some secrets are never meant to stay hidden, yet some are waiting, patiently, for the world to finally uncover them.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.